on to item 8. This is a report that I think we're all looking forward to hearing, as many Aucklanders and our friends in the media here do. I'm going to invite Matt Tucker and his team to the front. We will discuss as much of this as we can, but the following items are probably going to lead us into some level of secrecy later on, because items 8 and 16 are joined at the hip really to a degree, and we'll be giving you as much as we can, but some of what we're doing will have to remain in confidence because we are in the middle of some negotiations with the Crown, which has significant numbers in it, which are not fully determined. I think I welcome you guys to the stage. There is an appetite for knowing much more accurate figures and things about the sector than what anyone is able to give. And so, Matt, please lead your team and address this storm recovery and resilience consultation.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors. The paper in front of you is ostensibly really materials for consultation and a request that you approve those materials. Some detailed appendices around how we're going to communicate and consult and who with. There's two parts to the consultation. The first part is the recovery plan itself, so the structure of the Tamaki Makaurau recovery plan. We've socialised with this issue before, the concept of there being a regional part to the recovery plan, which is Auckland-wide, and then specific local area parts to the plan to consult on. The second part of the consultation is the Making Space for Water programme, which again you will be familiar with. The 9 initiatives, which range from initiatives around education and self-help right through to the fairly significant blue-green network proposal. The report talks to numbers, you will see. There's an overall quantum given, in particular an estimate of quantum for the Making Space for Water programme, particularly the blue-green networks, over 6 years, and some suggestions on what that might mean in terms of a targeted rate envelope. I guess I would just stress and to re-emphasise what the Mayor has just said. Those numbers need to be treated with caution in the context of the paper that we're about to talk to in the confidential session next. What contributions there may be to those numbers and how they split with central government, etc., is yet to be defined sufficiently that we should treat those numbers as particularly certain, so they need to be treated with caution.
We've got questions already on the basis of just what you've put out and what we've read. From the Deputy Mayor, please.
Thanks, Matt. Look, thank you for your work that you've done around this, but the questions to me feel quite general, and you could also say a little bit fluffy, you know, like what was your experience of the floods, or what are your aspirations for recovery? So I suppose my questions are, how will the consultation process help us to understand the specific issues that people are facing, rather than simply engaging people in general questions about their experience or aspirations? And can the consultation's questions be improved so that we get practical information from residents that will help us design solutions?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The questions are quite general in nature because it's going across the whole region, but we are having individual pop-up centres where we can collect that practical, personal experience and practical information for improving how we respond in the future, and how, in terms of making a more resilient Auckland in the future as well. So there will be a depth to the way that we gather that information.
So would I be correct then, in some of the really hard hit areas, for example, you know, Councillor Turner's Councillor Henderson's area, you will have potentially a more in-depth conversation and ask more specific questions, as opposed to areas that, I mean, every area has been affected in some way, but obviously some a lot more than others. So can you give me confidence that in the areas that have been particularly hard hit, those questions will be a lot more specific to give us the information that we need?
That's correct.
So all of those properties, Councillor Simpson, that suffered significant flooding damage are all going to be subject to individual assessments in order to confirm the risk categorisation that central government has outlined. So that means that every property will be treated on an individual basis. So we're putting quite a large team together at the moment to deal with those assessments across all of those properties.
Thanks, that gives me a lot more confidence. Thank you.
That's a lot of work.
It's a huge amount of work. So what it is going to mean, and I'll be quite blunt here for Healthy Waters, we're going to take a lot of staff off BAU at the moment in order to help do that work, because there aren't enough consultant resources available in Tamaki to do the work. But we owe it to those communities to get on and do that work as quickly as possible. So we're going to be rejigging our work programs to make sure that we give that process the maximum support. And we'll also be looking to elsewhere in the organisation where we've got spare capacity and capability to help as well, so we can do all this work in a timely fashion.
Could I ask a question before I get to Councillors Walker and Hills? Does the consultation document allude to the limited resources available in both hydrology and geotech within Auckland? I mean, I employed geotech in my companies, and you employ the number that the steady market meets, and this is not a steady market. There's a sudden demand on hydrologists and geotech that just don't exist, because nobody employs people on the off chance that you'll earn money off them when there's a 1 in 20 year rainfall. And so one of the reasons that things are slower is that these people just don't exist. Is it? And you don't disagree with that, but does the consultation sort of include the ability to get people the idea that we're not slow because we don't like them or we're incompetent? It's just that these are specialist things of which there's a limited number of them in New Zealand.
Just to answer your question, Your Worship, and two points. As we have been doing some significant work to look at the labour market generally and being able to respond to construction, but also those professional services that you outline. And there is a limited part of that market, as you say. We've got a big spike across the flood-affected regions and across the country. So there are some shortages there. And the second part of to give you assurance, we're communicating that quite clearly and looking at how we procure those resources so we make the best use and secure the resources as best we can to deliver those works efficiently for the affected people and for ourselves. So it's a real issue, but one that we've been working on.
Okay, that's very reassuring, because I mean, no matter how hard you try, you can't do any faster than what the available resources are. And that's part of what's in the background of our negotiations, to the extent that we're not being recalcitrant. You're just moving at the pace that it's possible to move without making monstrous blunders. I'll go to Councillor Walker, please.
So, a couple of issues, one of which I've already raised with you, and that is around the imperative of using roads as overland flow paths. And if I expressed it by way of some examples, in a large number of areas in the ward that John and I represent, Browns Bay, Mairangi Bay, Ariwa, and so on, you've got areas where the roads are the logical overland flow paths, but they're not recognised as such. There's no mention of that here. It requires reworking some of these roads. is it possible to bolt something on here? Otherwise, it just gets missed off. And further to that, we're actually impeding these flow paths currently by putting in raised tables and the like that are exacerbating the flooding. And if you're looking at areas where you've got homes and businesses in particular that are located at ground level, they are going to flood and flood and flood unless you much more efficiently treat the roads as overland flow paths. Because when the cesspits are full, it's the road that's the overland flow path. And as I've mentioned before, in other cities where severe flooding occurs, Singapore and elsewhere, you can go there, you'll see that that's the way it operates. So I've got a question there around that. And then the second question I've got to help inform things is there is information that should be made available to people about the existing catchment plans and the like, so that they can inform themselves better if they want to make an informed submission. The links and so on should be manifest so that they are easy for someone to follow stuff through, but that is not presently the case. So 2 questions there. Thank you.
So first of all, around the overland flow paths, totally agree with you that roads are a key part of the overland flow path network. The program does contemplate significant work on overland flow paths, and one positive thing of the water services reform is that it actually recognises overland flow paths effectively as stormwater assets that need to be managed and need to be complied with. So that will give us the ability to interrogate Auckland Transport when they're making decisions around road configuration. And the other point I'd make, Councillor Walker, is that we've always made our information on our catchment management plans available, but the process that we're going through for this particular consultation with the wider community is at a higher level, but we will also be doing specific consultation with impacted communities at the more granular level that you're talking to. That will come as a consequence of the work as we move into our next stage of evolution of the Making Space for Water program, and we actually move into concept design work and start looking at those particular opportunities that have been identified, particularly for the blue-green networks and also the high-risk properties, which will come through the risk classification
So coming
process.
back to answering my question, given that there is nothing in the document about roads as overland flow paths, other than the picture on the front cover that shows a road that is effectively an overland flow path but is overloaded, that is on the cover, is it possible to add some information around this? Otherwise, you're actually disregarding many geographical locations, and that goes to the issue that Desley Simpson raised, where the roads are almost the only secondary option and are affecting colossal numbers of businesses. And I refer you to, say, Devonport, where you've got Victoria Street, that's an overland flow path, and that's been messed up by raised tables and the like, and it's not adequately considered. I could enumerate any number of examples where this is the case. So can we add that?
Look, at this stage, as I said, the consultation that we're doing with the wider community is at a higher level. When we get to the next stage of evolution, which is looking at the specific problem areas that we've got in specific design solutions, of course we'll look at the opportunity that reconfiguring roads comes into the solution toolbox. There are many other potential options that are going to be available for resolving specific areas. But first of all, we need to know that we've got a bucket of money, if that's the right term, in order to face this challenge in the first place. Kia ora.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the amount of money that's going to be spent on blue-green networks and the like will boggle you. The amount of money relatively that gets addressed around reconfiguring and enhancing some of these roads as overland flow paths is considerably less. So I have got a real concern here around how we're approaching this whole issue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I accept that, but this is about just getting on with consultation. I think that you can Craig's quite clear in that he's in his understanding about the importance of roads and the barrier, and if we get on with this, what it'll allow us to do is interfere with AT, who are interfering with healthy waters. So I think your points are very well made. We need to get on with consultation, and I don't even understand quite why we are having to do consultation, actually. We're going to consult people whether we're going to do a good job. They want us to do a good job, but I suppose we have to do consultation. Personally, I hate consultation, but carry on, Richard Hills, please.
Kia ora, Mayor, and I was, and with no disrespect, and I guess when people say that it ends up sounding disrespectful, but I was going to say similar to you, and it is a question, you know, when I first heard of the consultation, before we got the full report, I thought we were meaning going into the granular levels. I do have, and it will get to a question, I do have concerns that the people who we really need to connect to aren't potentially wanting to be a part of this because they're more keen maybe on the buyout situation or waiting for something tangible. Is this the right way to do things? Do we have to do it this way? Could we, or is this more of a promotional piece to get people understanding the wider thing? I just worry that this could delay. Yeah, so I just know that the stressed people I talk to that have been dramatically affected will look at this and go, you already know how hard it is, you already know. I don't want to tell you that how I was flooded, because I guess we can tell that from data. So I guess, do you want to explain to me why this high level before the granular, or is that just how we have to do it?
I've been told that the consultation is a statutory requirement of a recovery plan. So don't get tangled up and get this bloody thing over and done so we can get on and do some work. Is that right?
But again, yes, that's correct. But again, in further to an earlier answer, that does not mean that we can't do quick, deep dive into the most affected areas and have relevant conversations. And look, we have to do that because there's a time pressure around the designation of properties in terms of categories for the buyout potential. So I think we're looking to move quite quickly on this, Councillor Hills.
Okay, so despite the rough time it's going to take on resources and personnel, it will all be happening concurrently, kind of. So the buyout situation, as long as we get that over the line, that'll be happening. There will be high-level design work potentially happening for catchments while we're asking for feedback.
Absolutely. We've already commenced work on high-level concept design and are very close to moving out and starting to do individual detailed property assessments.
Okay, and you're ready to explain that sort of thing to the public when you inevitably get pushed back that this is what they may see as further delay to action, even though that's not what it is?
Yeah, certainly we're willing to have that communication, but it is important that from an audit point of view, we are clear about this is a significant activity. We go through that process and we refine it with the communities and engage them in the design work.
Thank you. And one very last question. There's two documents. I did ring Craig this morning, but just for the public note, Craig, if you could confirm that the Waido Valley, which was missed off one of the documents, is supposed to be in both.
Correct. That typo's been sorted out today. So thank you for that feedback.
Kia ora, thank you.
On the other thing I should add, while I've got the microphone, Councillor Turner, that point you raised this morning around that granularity around areas like Titirangi, when we report back in September on the program and the budgets, we'd hope to have start to provide more granularity as to the exact numbers that we'll be spending in the different geographies. Kia ora.
You're on the list, Councillor Turner. Councillor Ferry's ahead of you, though.
Just quickly, does Healthy Waters have in their scope the slips? Because Healthy Waters talks all it, no. So who's doing the slips?
We are purely, as Healthy Waters, looking at the flooding risk.
So as I said to you, Mr. Tucker, earlier, we need to know we have some focus on, a fair focus. Thank you.
there's considerable focus on slips, in particular Muriwai, Karikari, Piha, that's been well communicated both to the community and this group.
But I'm just looking to understand where the budget sits, and I just want to make sure that everyone gets, well, there's a lot of emphasis being put on flooding, room for water, all that stuff, like I said this morning, and I just want to make sure that, you know, the slip victims don't fall behind par. Thanks.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions about the content of the consultation document. But first, I'd just like to seek some clarity about, obviously we've got this item, we've got the item about the buybacks as well. But we have in the past had a monthly update from the Recovery Office on progress on our governing body agenda, and we haven't this month. So are these two pieces of work sort of in lieu of that, or is there going to be another update to us, perhaps in a memo form, that talks about other work that the Recovery Office has been undertaking?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. You're right on all fronts there. These pieces of work are the significant pieces of work we're doing, that we've brought to you, and actually there will be a memo probably within the next week or so that talks to the upcoming engagement around Category 3 homes in particular.
Right, okay. And just following up from future, in the past, sorry, I've raised the idea that there be an update, one-pager perhaps for our Auckland that goes out after you've given your monthly updates, there not being one, and obviously there's going to be some specific comms around the two specific pieces of work. So that probably doesn't apply this month, but it would be good to see that considered for future months when the updates are more holistic.
And you'll be aware there's a webinar, we're planning a webinar based on some advice that you've been giving us over recent months. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to your office for engaging with myself and in particular Councillor Leone as well on that. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to that happening. Can I, in terms of the document itself, and we did receive this quite late, but from my quick skim through it, it by and large looked pretty good and pretty comprehensive. I just had a couple of specific things, and these are probably could be picked up in B. One was the infographic that you've used in a couple of places, the blue one that has the timeline. It seems to me that an important piece of information, which Nick's explained really well in community sessions, that's missing from that, is actually what happened before January the 27th, which was weeks of rain that meant that the ground was already saturated. So I guess that's an amendment I'd like you to think about, because I think that's really important context. This didn't actually start on the 27th of January. It actually started with weeks of wet weather prior to that. So that's one issue there for an amendment. The other is you've got on page 14 of the document, you've got the mention of the faux catchment, and you've referred to it as being Blockhouse Bay. Now, some of the area is Blockhouse Bay, but some of the area is more sort of Linfield, New Windsor as well. And so I just wanted you to consider perhaps changing the suburb description there a little bit. Obviously, we need people to understand that it's not the whole of the Faux, which is a much longer river, but Blockhouse Bay is a little bit further away from the people in my ward who've been badly impacted, who are definitely in the frame for that one. And then I've got one more small amendment. Yep, which is same page. You've got a beautiful picture there of Te Aonga. That's not in Mount Albert, that picture, that's in Mount Roskill or Wesley. So just a heads up there if we could change that. Thanks.
Those are very detailed set of questions. Well done. Councillor Leone, were you scratching your head, or do you want to talk to me?
Very quick question. First of all, I just want to acknowledge you, Matt, responding to the email from the Titirangi Green Bay residents group and agreeing to go out and see them. So that's a a good step forward about the issues there. With the consultation process, I'm just wondering, you've got the document here, but I know specifically the feedback that we were hearing was around the council land, particularly around the driveways that are owned by the council but go to their properties. So is there going to be kind of like tailored consultations to each area? I'm just wondering, like in those cases, will you have AT representatives there at those consultation sessions?
Through your worship, Councillor Leone, yes, there'll be granular conversations, specifically with those property owners themselves or where they've got easements. So,
Councillor Fletcher, please.
Oh, mine rather follows on from the questions that were posed by Councillor Hills, and I have a lot of sympathy with the way that he's going on this. And I'm making the assumption that an in-house legal counsel opinion was given that we are required to do this consultation. So I'm just wanting, for the avoidance of any doubt, to know that that is the situation, because I fear that a lot of life is about perceptions, and the perception is that council's kicking the touch in terms of giving people the certainty. And the second part of that question is just the way in which we're going to communicate it with utter clarity, and not, disappointment is a hard emotion to manage. And every time we get any communications from the flood victims, they are looking for some formality, some sign-off. Now, I understand that that's not possible, but nor do I want to mislead people. So I really need to know the nature of the type of consultation and communication prior to the consultation that you are anticipating. Just because there's just a lot of hurt, Councillor Sayers said before, there's a huge amount of pain and hurt and separations and kids not attending school and anxiety and trauma. With all of this, as we all know, I don't want to repeat it, but I really need you to be absolutely clear with us today that we absolutely have to do this, and you are absolutely going to give clearer communication than what we've had. Because I don't know about you, I'm getting calls from electorate officers, from MPs. Nobody seems to be able to know what's happening. Nobody seems to be able to give advice, and people are floundering. And so, I don't want to labour this in the meeting, but somehow I want to register this and for us to action it. And I am grateful that the CEO, who's been following this closely, is going to make sure that the document is fit for purpose.
Your worship, so Councillor Fletcher, yes, there has been internal legal advice and external legal advice, and just to provide you with further assurance around consultation, Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay are also doing this consultation, so it is a requirement under the Local Government Act. There isn't any option under either an order in council, and the government haven't chosen to do primary legislation to enable a quicker response otherwise. But so to get a clear audit, this is a consultation we need to proceed with. We acknowledge though, and Matt will talk to the communication.
Please don't go to one of the big law firms to get an opinion on whether you have to do this. Just do it.
So Simpson precedent provided that, your worship. So yeah.
Just to maybe emphasise and reiterate that there's limited impact from this exercise to the identification of the category of homes. So this exercise and the time it's going to take to do this exercise isn't added on to or particularly affecting the process that we're going through, both with central government and locally and with the other regions, to identify and classify the category of homes. This exercise is not...
I've heard that today, and I accept that, but I want to know how you're going to communicate it.
And that communication, as I alluded to earlier on, will start with this group next week with a memorandum explaining what happens next with the categorisation of homes. We're in danger of straying into the next session if you continue to push me on how homes get categorised, when that happens, and what the triggers are and the barriers are to that.
I'm not really genuinely not wanting to make it difficult for you. I'm just seeking assurance that in the communication, sometimes when people are stressed, they just hear a buzz in their head and they're only going to hear what they want to hear, that our communication is as clear, as simple and clear, taking people sequentially through what is going to happen, and that they understand that.
Through your worship, if I can intervene, we've heard the feedback, and I can assure you we'll take it on board. I think we'll close the loop with councillors in terms of the next steps and exactly what the communication will be. Obviously, we've got to do a final tune-up of the document itself, and alongside that is the comm strategy. So just to reassure, I've heard what you've said.
Thank you, Phil.
Right, I'm going to propose the recommendations which are there, and as a seconder will be the Deputy Mayor. I think we've had a fair old discussion about this, so I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. We're going to go to extension of time because, thank you. Seconder for the extension of time. Leone. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone on the contrary? Me. It was passed. Just. Any of those who are losing the will to live? Right, we're now going on to the Recovery Coordination Office update on the cost share negotiations with Treasury. There's a limited amount we can say about this. So the recommendations, we note the parameters, but basically I think we probably need to go into confidential for this.
Yeah. So Councillor Henderson second.
Yeah, look, if I might, I don't know that you need to discuss this. We've obviously got a discussion in the confidential item, but it was important to flag in the public part of the agenda that these matters were under consideration. So if you're happy with that advice, then I would suggest moving quite quickly, and then we'll get into the next segment.
Righto, well, anyone prepared to go into confidential? Move it by Turner and Walker. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Righto, we'll give 5 minutes to clear the room. It's not that it's overly secret, but we have to give our officers the chance to negotiate.